California politics, in many ways, marches to a different drummer than the rest of the U.S. In our polls, Governor Schwarzenegger improved his standing with Californians in every poll we did in 2006. At the time of the special election, the governor's standing, in retrospect, was at a low point. 54% viewed him personally as an unfavorably, 38% favorably. His job rating was similar, 56% disapproved, 37% approved. And in re-election trial heats at that time, he was 6 points behind Angelides. However, as 2006 began, he pulled even to Angelides in our February poll, moved out ahead by 4 points in April and by 7 points in our final pre-primary poll in late May. Following the primary, I think one of the significant things was that Angelides did not get the usual bump that a winning candidate gets following a competitive primary. Our next poll after the primary, the governor was led Angelides by an even larger margin, 8 points. That moved to 10 in our September survey and to 16 in our final pre-election poll. And he ended up winning by 17. In the exit polls, if you look at them, job approval rating of the governor among those who voted in the election, 65% approval. This is really, if it's to be believed, 65% is a return to the high points of his 2004 job performance ratings, when throughout the entire spring and summer he was rated extremely highly through his kind of honeymoon period with voters. He also was able to work with the legislature to put the 4 bonds on the ballot, which basically focused Californians' attention on the future, and it was I think, an important paradigm for the governor's campaign. The governor really pretty much took away every campaign issue that the Democratic challenger really could bring to the table. At the time of our final pre-election poll, when we asked Schwarzenegger backers what was their main reason for supporting Schwarzenegger, 63% said it was his stand on the issues that was the most important factor in their supporting him. When we asked the same question of Angelides supporters, so undefined was his image that the largest proportion was saying it was his party affiliation. It was the D next to his name. Schwarzenegger was also adroit at avoiding issues that I think could have put him in an awkward position, either with his base or with the voters. He avoided immigration as a real campaign issue. He didn't have much to say on that. Also, health reform. He finessed that issue by basically holding a health summit in the summer and basically saying that's going to be my #1 priority in the next time around. So he didn't have to get too specific about what he would do or what he wouldn't do. Yet the governor's re-election win was more a personal victory, really, for the party of Arnold Schwarzenegger than for the GOP. The state as a whole, when we're talking about statewide elections, non-presidential elections, we're probably looking at a structural, long-term factor of low turnout. In primary elections, we're looking at 1 out of 3 registered voters turning out. In general elections, we're looking at about 1 out of 2. I think that's going to carry on for the foreseeable future. I think, to me, one of the more remarkable outcomes of this election was the passage of all the bonds. That outcome, I don't think, was clear 1 month or so before the election. But in our final poll, one thing really struck me about how voters were reacting to the bonds that really gave me the sense that these things are probably all going to pass, and that is we found this element of block voting across all of the infrastructure bonds. 1/3 of all of the voters in our final pre-election poll said they were going to vote yes on every one of the Prop 1s. And when we looked at the no voting on the block side, only 12% of voters said they're going to vote no across all the Prop 1s. Over the course of the campaign, Californians became much more optimistic about the direction of California. In the exit poll, 62% of voters said California was moving in the right direction. Contrast that with the nation, where Americans nationally were saying the country was moving in the wrong direction, 55% to 40%.
This is our 5th fall election in 5 years. a record and a sign that we are indeed becoming a unique democracy. Clearly, the GOP party and candidates and turnout was hurt by the scandals that took place in Washington over the last couple of years. And it wasn't just one scandal, it was several scandals, and that certainly raised doubts about the focus of the GOP and their leadership. Schwarzenegger enjoyed the support of 1 in 3 voters who disapproved of Bush and the Iraq War, and who voted for Feinstein and Brown on November the 7th. Propositions, as Mark indicated, proved to be a mixed bag. The infrastructure bonds ended up passing by comfortable margins. Our last survey showed weak to moderate majority support for the 1B to 1E package, but the late bipartisan campaign by the governor and prominent Democratic office holders seemed to be decisive in that race. While Proposition 83 passed, 85, 86, 87, 88, and 89, and 90 all failed, as you know. What did we learn about the initiatives from our perspective? Big spending on the no side. On 86 and 87 were decisive, and importantly, the messages from partisan leaders on the yes side of Proposition 87 were not enough to win. 2 of 7 initiatives passed. 6 of the 6 governors and legislatures initiatives passed, once again pointing to the voters' preferences for looking at propositions in which there's broad bipartisan consensus. I want to now take a moment to discuss the 4 megatrends which we saw in the current election. As Mark noted, there was low voter turnout once again. We saw historic lows reached in the primary, edging out the 2002 primary, just the last one, and the 2006 general election now looks like it will end up lower than the 2002 general election. In our looking at the electorate district by district, this seems to be not just about GOP turnout and GOP regions, since both parties seem to be struggling with low turnout across regions such as the Central Valley, Orange County, and Riverside, San Bernardino, all growing regions where that are undergoing significant demographic and economic changes in the voting age population. Second, as we noted earlier in a report that we released based on our recent surveys, the electorate is becoming less representative of the population. The GOP and Democratic parties show a lack of ability and interest to expand the size and composition of the state's electorate. Low rates of voter registration and voting undermine the democratic process. As Mark indicated, independent voters are on the rise. When you count up the number of voters since the recall, you will note that the absolute number of Democrats and Republicans have declined since the recall, as have the Greens, Peace and Freedom, Natural Law, and Libertarians. Independents grew by about 484,000, while the overall voter roll grew by 400,000. Democrats outnumbered Republicans by about a 5-point margin, according to the CNN exit poll, but still lost the governor's race, and yet won many other races. What's happening? Well, major party voters now make up about 3/4 of the electorate, but about half of all voters are either weak Democrats, weak Republicans, or independents. A majority of Californians say a third party is needed because the major parties today are inadequate. The lack of party loyalty explains why in a state like California, Phil Angelides can lose, Schwarzenegger does not have coattails, Californians returned a divided government to Sacramento, and partisan appeals failed to sway voters on state propositions. In closing, the California experience of the past 5 years points out the flaws of direct democracy, certainly, but also the merits of a process that can energize voters and allow them to make decisions. The two-party system is having trouble attracting new voters, adapting to the changing demography, and adjusting to the increasing use of the ballot box. What we see taking its place is a hybrid democracy which preserves the current system of elected representatives to carry out their duties, but incorporates increased amounts of citizen input and oversight. And that may be the answer to the public's desire for populism and the solution to the partisan divisions, special interest, influence, and voter distrust that currently plague America's political process. California could lead the way as the nation seeks a new political direction. Thank you.